Hello to everyone. Welcome to Impact on the Ground with Tiia. I'm the CEO of a Tech for Good company and passionate about making a difference. This podcast series will dig deeper into what it means to make impactful change in society, and whether you are an individual, charity, social enterprise representative, company, grant maker, or government body, I hope you will enjoy these conversations. We focus on the dynamics between those who have resources to give and those who actually do the beneficiary work and tackle the challenges in our society. I'm proud to present my first guest to my first podcast now today, Tom Levitt. Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Thank you, Tiia.
Yeah, we've been collaborating with Tom for a little while and have had very interesting discussions related to company and charity relationships, or company and social value organization relationships, and therefore I thought that Tom would be the perfect discussion partner today for this first podcast series. Tom is a consultant for responsible business. He has written several books of responsible business, and one of the books that really has inspired me is A Company Citizen. Okay, there it is. Yes, the cover. Yes, and of course you've been writing a lot of other books as well. And Tom is also a former member of Parliament, and he knows loads about the private and third sector collaboration. But let's start now, Tom, about A Company Citizen. Why have you chosen to use that word rather than company giving or corporate social responsibility or some other language that has been used around the topic?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, because you're absolutely right. The language that we use is very important because it can give a lot away about the way we really think about these things. But ideally, it should focus and mean exactly what we intend it to mean. So I don't like to talk about company giving because that is giving is an active process, and it's all focused on the giver. I want to focus on the impact. What difference does it make? If you've given money and nothing has changed as a result, you can't really be said to have had any impact. I don't like to use the phrase corporate social responsibility because, and I think it's a phrase that's been around since the 1950s. And in the 1970s, someone wrote an article to say this phrase has become meaningless. Well, if it was meaningless in the 1970s, it's fairly meaningless now as well, in that it tends to cover an area of company work in their relationships with charities, which is short-term, which is superficial, which is voluntary, by which I mean it's not inherent in the mission of the company. And again, it's input-driven rather than impact-driven. It's about ticking boxes, not about changing the world. There's another reason which I don't like it, is that 98% of all businesses in this country are small businesses, under 250 employees. And I did some research a few years ago when I asked small businesses how they engage with their communities. And one of the questions was, what do you do in CSR terms, corporate social responsibility terms? And their reply was, we don't do anything. We're not corporates. It doesn't apply to us. The corporates are the big guys, not the small guys. So I picked the word company and I picked the word citizen, because a citizen, as we all know, is someone A, who looks out for their neighbors, but B, has a balance of duties and responsibilities which they need to discharge. So the company, being a social body, if you like, as well as an economic body, but being one which looks out for its neighbors and which has duties as well as rights and opportunities.
Yeah, that is a good point that, yes, there are a lot of companies who might not be feeling comfortable with CSR in terms of their size. Maybe they think that CSR is very expensive to somehow contribute, and it has to be something super extensive. Or then, also CSR might be little bit difficult if you don't really get into the topic and see how you could be building it into your strategy. What does it actually mean? And I guess in that sense, strategic CSR could be almost similar to company citizenship thinking. So yes, I'm very familiar using CSR myself and very comfortable using it still, but I really like the company citizenship kind of philosophy and also, you know, the language, but maybe still companies are a little bit more familiar with the CSR aspect. But yes, about the strategic approach, and that's what you are now talking about. Let's dig in a little bit deep.
Give one piece of advice to a charity approaching a company, and that is if you want to talk to them about CSR and they send you to someone from the marketing department, then it's the wrong person. If they're sending you to someone in the HR department, that's much more likely to get a meaningful, long-term positive relationship out of it. If it's just about marketing and ticking boxes and making the company look good, that's not what it should be for, but too often it is.
Okay, that is actually a good point. Of course, all contributions are valuable, and we talk a little bit later. You know, what can companies actually ask as return, and what would be ethically right, and kind of how companies can benefit for this a little bit further. But let's talk about the size of the market, kind of the CSR a little bit, and I have some numbers here. There's no one data source that could actually verify what are we actually talking about in terms of companies giving monetary contributions. But to give anybody who is listening to this podcast, the charity sector, which you know, it doesn't include now social enterprises, which we also talk about, but the charity sector gets approximately 23 billion pounds annually as voluntary income, which then consists of donations from individuals, approximately 10 billion. And then there are pretty much like 5 to 6 billion worth of grants from trusts and foundations. Governments give 2 to 3 billion annually, and then companies are reported to give pretty much from 3 to 6 billion, depending on the data sources. However, it's not about only money. Companies give loads of volunteering hours, whether it's just like regular volunteering to any task, group volunteering, but also increasingly skills-based volunteering, which is very valuable. There are very extensive product and service donations given, and probably we have all heard quite nice examples even during this COVID crisis, where companies have distributed loads of like digital device, all kind of like software and stuff, and to help charities to actually digitalize faster and moving their services online. So this is kind of the, you know, a little bit about the market size, but Tom, what would be now the approach if some company wants to become now really kind of coherently company citizen or build a strategic, meaningful CSR program? How should they go about it? What are the first things to do?
A very good question. I think it's worth remembering, of course, that 90% of all charities have an income of under 100,000. So when you're talking about the billions that come into the sector, actually most of it goes to a relatively small number of charities. And very often I think the possibility that companies can not only do good, but benefit themselves from working very locally, particularly SMEs, is often overlooked, and clearly there are opportunities to develop that. But if what so often happens, a charity or a community centre is suddenly told you've got 50 employee volunteers turning up a week on Thursday, please find them something to do, which very often is the heart of the CSR operation, then the chances are that it's not part of a strategic plan by the company. You were absolutely right to make a distinction between volunteering time, and I, for instance, if I want to have my house decorated, I wouldn't go along to the local accountants and say, would you come along and decorate in your own time for this for me? I'd go to a professional decorator. But still, if the company is if the company is offering time, then I would first of all be quite wary. Make sure you need it, first of all. Make sure you can use it properly. If they're offering skills, then that's a much better prospect, because skills can change your operation. They can build you a website. They can do your auditing. That they can listen to children read. All those sort of things are about not just using skills, but developing skills. And that's the third phase, from time to skills transfer. Yeah. So that you're not only building the skills within the charity, but actually the company's getting something out of it as well. Maybe the employees are experiencing using their skills in a new context. Let me give you the example of Boots Opticians. Yeah. They went out to read to children in primary schools as part of their CSR operation, but they used a particular book which had been designed for this purpose. And the book had hidden in it eye tests. Now, children don't have the routine eye tests at school that they used to. But what these employees found was that they were picking up children with eye problems and helping them to get the help that they needed, whether it was glasses or whatever, in a way which not only helped the children, but it really gave the employees a sense of mission. This is what we're here for. We're here to help children see better and therefore learn to read better.
And also, I guess Boots got business as well, which is, there's no harm in that either. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, that's what makes a business charity partnership sustainable. It's the fact that there's a reason to continue doing it from the business point of view. Normally it's reputation, normally it's employee engagement, but it can also be developing employee skills through that relationship with a charity whose mission is somehow related to the mission of the company.
Yes, definitely. And, we have in my company done quite a lot of studies related to these skills-based volunteering programs and what actually social enterprises and charities need. You spoke about charities. We also did with social enterprises, and there are a little bit differences because social enterprises are business entities and maybe they have already certain business type of skills, but then, there are still a lot of similarities in requests, and yes, we have found very encouraging information on this kind of skills-based volunteering help and the need. And I guess just like one finding that I could emphasize here, or actually two findings. First of all, the kind of, if it's just an advice, somebody advising you hour or two, it's nice to, of course, know what you should be doing, but if you don't have then the capability to do it or money to do it, it's kind of, it just creates frustration, doesn't it? So it should be leading to some kind of a little bit more tighter collaboration, maybe giving more hours to actually get things started. I personally sometimes think that it would be good that if there would be, if a company delivers, let's say, skills-based volunteering program and really wants to start collaborating with organizations, they could maybe put in place like a small budget of this kind of expense budget, because sometimes, let's say, IT people, they help you out, setting up things and stuff. You might be needing to buy £100 software, or you might be needing to kind of acquire something or another laptop or something. And what we have learned, not only the smallest charities, they might be even medium, big size charities, they might not have the grant money to actually buy those things. So it would help them, the skills-based volunteering projects, to really kind of boom if there would be a little bit this kind of expense money. And then what we have learned is that charities and social enterprises have really good experiences, like you said, about these programs. But then I guess the negative side, what companies should remember, is that they have to treat the organizations like they were their clients, although they are not doing the client work, because otherwise the company work kind of takes over, and sometimes then they don't have time to actually contribute what they promised to. So, and then it leaves the charities and social enterprises in trouble. But I guess, Tom, you would be saying something to this about whether the CSR is strategic or whether the company is company citizen after all, if these are the challenges?
Yes, indeed. I've been writing this down, that sometimes the best thing that a company can offer to a charity or to a social enterprise is simply to help them create a business plan, to create a strategy. And if they can have that help, it will mean that their decisions in future about how they operate are better informed. And it will also have the impact of raising the awareness of the issues that charities and so on have to face within the business, and that will help the business then give more focused advice next time. You talked about software. I mean, if you look at a company like Salesforce, the support they give to charities through software and through training is second to none, and it's a massive budget they have for doing that. But I'll give you another example. This is a very well established story, but it's of two big organizations, because most of the stories that make it out there are from big organizations. And it's the Samaritans charity working with Network Rail. Now, what they do is they train Network Rail staff who work on station platforms to identify potential suicide victims and to take the first steps in approaching them and talking them down and talking them out of committing suicide. And this gives the employees, even if they never use those skills, it gives them a sense of responsibility, it gives them a sense of ownership, it gives them a sense of importance, and it's really good from an employee engagement point of view. But from the company's point of view, if one person jumps in front of a train, it can cause tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of disruption. So it is a really good business case for Network Rail to invest in training in suicide awareness amongst its staff, and it saves them an awful lot of money. So it's a win-win situation. Lots of examples like that, which have been worked out over the years. They're long-term relationships, and there's a real business case for both the Samaritans and Network Rail to take it forward.
Yeah, and I think this leads to then the compatibility aspect, that if you start looking collaboration opportunities through, also the gains and kind of what kind of, goals you would be having. And I guess there is no negative things about thinking about, like you said, saving costs from the company side, or then paying money to charities so they get more income to utilize their expertise. And I guess the importance is to understand, first of all, what the charity or social enterprise does and what the impact is that they have actually created in order to even start to evaluating these organizations. Yes. So you are a keen speaker for understanding the social value delivered, and you've been active member of committee who has now created a new pretty standard. It will be a voluntary standard, but it will be a standard of social impact measurement and reporting. Would you like to comment on this?
Certainly, yes. I've been a strong supporter of the Social Value Act ever since it became law in 2012. And what the Social Value Act does is it makes it possible for, I'm just literally saying what the law says, makes it possible for local and national government to use its procurement policies up to a certain level for contracts over a certain size to create more social value by choosing one tender over another. Now that sounds quite dry and mathematical, and it is. And that's why for quite a few years, only really a few large local authorities, Birmingham, Manchester, name but two, had really taken the social value message and pushed it. About 2015, David Cameron said that he would make the NHS into a real social value procurement agent to create better social value from its procurement. It didn't really happen. But this year, the government has announced that across all government procurement, it will now be prioritising social value. And that means going way beyond what the law says. And it means that, for example, if you're bidding for waste removal contract, then and one company says we send half of the stuff to landfill, and we put some of the rest straight into a river, and another one says for the same price we put nothing into landfill and nothing into rivers, and we recycle all of it, then you would choose the recycling one. You choose the one which has the greater positive impact on the environment or on the community. And the law now allows really any organisation to use its procurement policies in that way. But it's not just about the environment. You could say you could choose between a company which takes modern slavery very seriously and a company that just ticks the box and says, yes, we have a policy on it, for example. So all of these are ways in which you can get a side benefit, if you like, for either the community or the environment. Now, unfortunately, there's no way, obvious way, A, of measuring those things, and B, of comparing. How would you compare saving someone from slavery in the Far East with not putting as much waste to landfill? So you can reduce it all to money in one sense, or you can take a view which says, in a sense, it doesn't matter what we measure as long as we start off a baseline. What we're measuring is change, and we're able to account for those changes through our actions. And that's pretty well what the British Standard is going to say. It's called Enhancing Social Value, BS 8950. And it will be saying, really doesn't matter how you measure social value, but these are the care, these represent the care you should take when choosing how to show that social value has been created, and how then to be able to compare one creation of social value against another. So it's really about a sort of disciplined approach to measurement, as opposed to rubbing a magic lamp which suddenly gives you a formula which is going to tell you exactly how much social value you've created. But the important thing really is to create the atmosphere where companies and others, anyone who's procuring, wants to do that. And that's why I'm a strong supporter of Buy Social, which is the Social Enterprise UK campaign to persuade large companies to procure from smaller social enterprises. And it's been incredibly successful. Millions of pounds worth of work going to social enterprises, producing social value as a result of corporate procurement policies.
Yeah, and whether you are buying services as a company from social enterprises or contributing, your time, money, and goods and services to charities, or even buying something from charities. Charities also sell services, many types, to organizations. I guess it's important that the actual organization who does the beneficiary work actually reports on the impact. And, we have seen that a lot, that, companies try to report on impact that obviously they didn't make, they helped it made with their resources, but they weren't actually dealing with the beneficiaries. And so in terms of community engagement work, I'm not talking about now recycling or supply chain management, but if you're working with social enterprises and charities who actually do the beneficiary work, it should be them to report the impact, and then the company can of course claim bits and pieces of it, and they helped making the impact, but they cannot report it without those organizations. And I think it's very good that the standard is now there, and it really kind of puts this on the focus that, first of all, there has to be some kind of reporting, existing before you can actually start analyzing things. What do you think about this monetary value? I mean, in my company, we've been discussing this a lot with various organizations. Should there be monetary value put on the impact the company has made? Obviously, companies are profit making and they like numbers, which is great. I mean, we are a company as well, we like numbers, but is there a price tag to an impact that you made?
That's a really good question. there are some things which it is possible quite easily to reduce to a financial difference. I mean, for example, you can show that an investment in solar panels pays for itself in X number of years, and so therefore you can produce a benefit to the environment by looking at how that performs over a number of years. And other ways where costs can be reduced as a result of social value being created, which is a win-win situation. However, there are others in where it's very difficult to put a financial value on it. And this is a problem which some of the models for calculating social value which exist out there already face. I'm thinking of two of them, for example, one of which counts unpaid voluntary work at, I forget the figures exactly, let's say £10 an hour, and the other counts it at £12 an hour. That's not a huge difference. But one of them counts professional advice at £25 an hour, and the other counts professional advice as being worth £75 an hour, which assumes everyone's a lawyer, really, I suppose. But so the social value which they generate is entirely dependent on the arbitrary figure that's been used to represent the value of 1 hour of volunteering. And therefore, you're going to get two completely different answers. Which one's right? Well, you can justify both of them in a sense.
And actually, it doesn't still report the change. I mean, if you gave the advice with the £10 an hour and it totally changed the life of a charity and suddenly they could scale and do whatever, that actually made a difference in the beneficiary's life. Maybe they can now contact 100 people more. Maybe they influence, lives of, 100 people, like more than they did before. But obviously, that kind of like a sequences of activities or consequences, it's very hard to determine.
You're making a really, really good point there, in that these are measurements of input. They're not measures of output or outcome or impact. And I don't know why in a social value situation you would want to be measuring input, because it tells you nothing about the social value that's being created.
Yeah, so how, it's a tricky bit, but I guess, our standpoint at the moment in my company is that we try to focus on more intangible, but still kind of descriptive kind of outcome impact type of a thing, that, how many, maybe people got to work, from unemployment, and then they started earning their money, the lives of their children, improved, and which then led to something. So it's like how their life changed. And I think, to be honest, even from the individual perspective or employee perspective, the consumer perspective, these stories are actually more impactful than somebody reading from the financial line saying that we created £12,000 of impact. So I
put a tenner into a collecting box. Nothing else changes. That's a measure of input, not a social value measure of output.
So I guess we should focus more on measured change that was actually created, and then think about more of a storytelling aspect of it, and encourage also in companies, employees, stakeholders to get involved in these stories, and that would then create the powerful kind of like a platform of company reputation building and employee engagement, rather than trying to get an extra line on the balance sheet.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. So what do you say now, Tom, because we have to wrap it up, we could speak here the whole day, I know, but what would you say to companies at this time of the crisis, some of which are actually putting a lot of effort into building their CSR strategies and see this as an opportunity, but those who said that now it's not the time? We've been actually contacting hundreds of companies through our research, but also our product development. And we hear these stories from companies that they are just saying that, oh, our employees are overwhelmed, we cannot go further with this employee engagement or volunteering thing, and we are just struggling, so we cannot think about these kind of things. So what would you say to companies who think like this at the moment?
Just around the corner from where I live, there's an estate agent, and they closed down pretty much with the original lockdown from coronavirus. And they furloughed almost all of their employees. And what did the furloughed employees do? They all went to volunteer for the local food bank. They all took part in making meals for distribution to people who needed meals at home. And they collected 250 black plastic bags full of gifts for charity, where they went around collecting from people's doorsteps these bags. And they were able, therefore, to not just raise money for charity, but also to provide goods for the charity shops. And that was a company, a corporate decision taken in that office, that this was going to be our response to COVID. And obviously that was done at fairly short notice. Yeah. And to be fair, it built on a company which was already aware of its role and the potential good that it could do in the community. But they really stepped up to the mark. And there have been lots of examples of that. Yeah. Yeah. There are companies, there's a hotel chain, for example, which went into furlough. And when it came out, it paid all its low-paid workers the living wage, as opposed to simply the national minimum wage. Now, that sounds bizarre. You have a big financial shock and you come back and you increase your costs. But actually, no, this was an investment in those people, because it was a sign of good faith, and it would build a relationship between the company and its employees. So for all of these reasons, I think that there is a business case for businesses to engage with the community, to have a positive impact on the environment. And this is all done. I think there's a very simple way to ensure that this happens. And that's simply to stop looking down at what your quarterly returns are and look up, look for a longer term horizon. And if you look for that longer term horizon, as family owned companies always used to do when they were the norm, things fall into a different perspective. And you can see how your investments in social value in all of its different forms will pay off, not just for the beneficiaries and the communities and the environment, but for the company as well.
Yeah, a beautiful story that, and yes, there are many stories that companies have that engagement within themselves, that they actually want to still do things together and not just go home and take the time off and wait this crisis to disappear. Also, since lots of charities and social enterprises, they have such a good knowledge in various things that affect the life of all of us, whether it's mental health issues, eating disorders, illnesses, learning disabilities. There are just vast range of topics that actually are in our each and every one of lives. And that means that every company employee has them as well. So if the employees could be linked with that, whether it's money donations, skills, different kind of projects to kind of collaborate these organizations, it will create a lot of good within the staff, and also takes care of their mental health, and sense of purpose and stuff. So even in this time, I think it might be difficult to keep up the spirit, but these kind of collaborations could be a wonderful way of doing it, and it would benefit both parties. And there is, like you said, a lot of time. There are products in the storage. There might be money somewhere, or people would like to maybe fundraise now, innovate new fundraising kind of methods. And that is exactly what, example, like charities need now. They haven't been able to raise funds like they used to be. Maybe there are companies who can innovate something totally new for them and help them get off the ground, in this new situation. Yeah. So it creates a lot of nice opportunities. And we just, of course, hope that, companies see this and kind of start to look at this with fresh eyes, and not just think about this crisis as a kind of a crisis situation where you have to just hide and focus on yourself.
Every crisis brings opportunities.
Yes, yeah, certainly. Okay, Tom, time is up, I guess. I'm sure we will have a chat again, even in this podcast series. So thank you everyone for listening. Impact on the Ground with Tiia. We hope you learned something new or got some ideas. And if there is anything else you'd need to request, or maybe you have a topic that you would like me to just present here in my podcast, please just visit www.whatimpact.com, and you'll find there is an intercom service and channels to communicate with me. Thank you so much, Tom. And I guess you have some new book coming up. Something else than a business book.
Apart from The Company's Citizen,
yeah.
There's also The Courage to Meddle, which was my biography of the architect of the New Deal in America, Francis Perkins. And this talks about, at the end of the book, it talks about the impact of the policies which she created in the 1930s and what impact they're having now. And these are all related issues to what we've been talking about.
Yes, they are.
They're to do with factory safety, ending child labour, minimum wages, maximum hours, those sort of things. So it's a really good story, I think, as well as being a wonderful, wonderful woman.
Yeah. And that is probably our next topic, Tom. We have to discuss this. Sometimes, like we said, we think that charities and social enterprises solve the issues and challenges in the society, or actually take care of them. But many times it might be that the governments need to have changed the regulations before the charities and social enterprises can perform effectively. But that's another discussion. Sorry?
That's a whole new conversation.
I know. So let's book that in for maybe later this year or beginning of next. Well, anyway, thank you so much, Tom. And thank you everybody who's been listening.